Hello, I'm Saman Bhatia. I'm a financial journalist, and with me today we've got Ken Simons and James Dorrington, and they're two of the founding partners of ICF Consulting. Now, I'm going to mention three words which some companies think about and they come out in a cold sweat, which are governance, risk, and compliance. Now, that's partly because, it's a legal requirement to get those right, but what you say is what is a chore for many could actually give value and could actually give benefit to companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part, well, I don't think, one of the things that we try and do with our clients, and we've had some engagements where we come in at the very, very beginning when an organisation is trying to sign off the funding for a programme of work like this. And we spend some time working with a CRO and their departments, and with a view that we do a presentation to a board or a committee to go off and get sign off and funding. And I suppose we look at the value in two legs. So we look at the typical protection or avoidance value. So, making sure you adhere to regulation, you don't get any fines, making things efficient, getting things out of Excel spreadsheets, all of the, there's a new regulation that's coming up, and this what we do at the moment doesn't meet that need. So there's always a typical sort of angle that is available, and what we think or what we see is that compromises the true value that you get from something like this. So we look at it in two legs, the protection and the avoidance piece, but that we also see that there's value that's there to develop an organisation, basically. And when we try to get people to look at and focus on areas in that bucket, and the sorts of things that we see are, I suppose, a greater appreciation of risk and compliance. And I say that in a bit sort of a bit of a throwaway statement, but that is quite a powerful step for an organisation to go through, because it means that once they understand that, they make their products and services a lot more resilient and a lot stronger, basically. And also we've seen occasions where a client has created a new product because they've introduced aspects into their current product that made it stronger and more robust. So that there are, significant development values like that. We also see the relationship between the various, protagonists, the various lines of defence within an organisation improving, because there's more mutual understanding between the first, second and third line about what each one of them does. Part of what we do, we think, that relies on an element of education. I think education becomes a key aspect of what we think is important. Education and understanding is a key aspect of what we think is important when you go through something like this. And we've walked into clients where they don't know the difference between an issue and a risk, and they build up processes with that lack of understanding, which then compounds and make things even more complicated. So there's lots and lots of things like this that people take for granted that you get out of an undertaking like this. We try to get organisations to focus on, those value creation and those developmental aspects of doing something like this, because it means then that the business buy into it. Otherwise, they're being done to. And we think, it's a bit like, we talk about this sometimes, why we've managed to educate our kids to have a balanced diet. If you tell kids purely that you have to eat vegetables because you're going to be unhealthy, blah, 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 they won't do it. So we've made that interaction a lot richer, and we think that this is of a similar sort of nature, basically. We're not trying to get you to do this because you have to do it. We're trying to get you to do it because it has value, and it's developmental for you, basically. So we try and go at it like that, if that makes sense.
It's true culture change, isn't it? Because again, that's another phrase that gets bandied about. But if you make people's lives easier, these systems aren't just purely enablers, and you can change culture by working on spreadsheets as well. But the problem is so much effort goes to shoving a process, particularly for governance, risk and compliance, onto a spreadsheet. Constantly, we find that a lot of poor risk and compliance professionals just spend all their time jockeying a spreadsheet and then turning that data collection into some kind of report. They finish that and then the whole thing starts again. If that's your job, you can't, some of the stuff that Ken was getting into, you can't then become the business's partner to advise them on how, they could make their products and services better, safer, be an advisory sort of person, or like we associate with lawyers and things like that, and help them to develop the business in the right way, because they're constantly stuck on these spreadsheets. So by having this system as an enabler, taking that process and spreading it across the company rather than just one person or department, condensing it onto one file and then sticking that into one department, you spread the load, and then the governance, risk, compliance, audit people just become better advisors to the firm. So that's what we see when we were explaining this to a customer last week. And sometimes when you're doing this sort of stuff at the beginning, and sometimes it is the first journey that the customer has been on, you kind of get this little bit of a silence where, and what my brain does is says, I don't think they believe me. But then we try to use anecdotes to prove to them that if you do this and you stick together and you stay confident through this journey, you're going to get all this at the end of it, stay with it kind of thing, So that's where we're coming from.
So you get it right, you get better processes. It frees up people to not only just be filling in spreadsheets, but to actually think how we can do things better.
Absolutely.
And it's less, maybe it's less cognitive overload. It frees you up to get things more correct, and it's less effort if you get it correct.
Absolutely.
Correct. Yeah.
You mentioned some of the pitfalls. Any other pitfalls which you've seen? There's a reason why people find it a bit, of a dread to do. But are there some pitfalls which you have countered, and you want to tell people, don't be scared?
Yeah, I think the value is an important thing, and then once you've got that value, you need to make sure people are clear and they understand it. So there's a lot of communication with with boards to make sure that they understand what they're investing in. And then there's communication throughout an organisation, making sure that people understand the value and what it means for them as well. So they go on that journey. I think the communication up front is probably one of the most, if not the most important thing that you need to invest in, for want of a better term. So it's not necessarily surprises. No, it's not an insignificant cost or an insignificant effort, depending on how you do it. I'll say that's one thing. The other thing is, I think, agreeing how you're going to run the project as well. One of the things that we focus on is, at the end of the day, people go out and they buy some new software. The reason you bought that new software is because it's better. So you need to recognise that. And what you do now is not the be-all and end-all. Companies got to get to a situation where they understand the outcomes of what they're striving to get to. So we encourage our clients to think about their outcomes, but more importantly, understand their outcomes. Because we see lots of companies doing things and they've lost an understanding of why they're doing it. So we become a bit juvenile in that respect, in that we get people we ask them why, we ask them continually why until they understand and they can articulate that and they feel comfortable about doing that themselves. What that does is it makes people a bit more flexible in how things are done if they understand what the outcome is, because the outcome can be achieved in multiple ways. And what you can also do is get multiple outcomes from doing one thing sometimes, whereas you might be doing 5 or 6 different things. That sort of focus we find is very good in getting people to think about objectively what they're doing and why they're doing it. So one of the key things that we work through is that outcome-based approach, and then wrapping the governance around it to make sure that people are held to account if they want to, I was going to almost swear, but if I want to...
Not on this podcast. It's a clean podcast.
When you get into, bastardising systems to do stuff that people do now, we want the governance to be in place to stop that unless they clearly understand that they have to do it. We're not saying that all companies are the same. We get that. But there are lots of things that companies do that they don't need to, and we want to get to the bottom of it and make sure that they're clear that they do know why they're deviating off what might be perceived as a norm or best practice. And if they think that is the right thing to do, then we would wholeheartedly condone that they go down that route.
I think just to build on that, Ken, what we say often to customers is don't be afraid to have an open mind and maybe change slightly what your risk process is today. Because if you do try and recreate that in a system that's had multi-million pounds, dollars, euros investment in, it will cost you money. So learn what it does. Not all the GRC systems excel in the same areas. So think about why you bought it, what you liked about it, and build on that and configure it in a way that works for you with your current policies and standards, etc., etc. Otherwise, if you try and bring your current process to the system as opposed to the other way around, you're going to end up spending lots of money that you don't need to. And we've helped lots of customers overcome that actually, and hopefully save them a few bob on the journey.
So you metaphorically held their hands, as it were, through the process, and it's not been as bad as they think.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, quite literally. But we've got we've got a client at the moment that we're working with that was trying to implement a GRC system, and they were at it for a year basically, and they had an amount of money agreed and budgeted with that supplier to go off and do some stuff before they did their initial implementation. We worked with them within 6 weeks. We'd stripped that back to about 10% of what they'd originally budgeted, and they went live within about 6 to 8 weeks. And it was turning their thought processes to focus on the outcomes, basically. There is always sometimes an element of miscommunication. I think when you talk to GRC companies and also businesses, and that's an area that we spend quite a lot of time in as well. So there is an element of miscommunication that does contribute to that as well, to be fair. But one of the key things is making sure that you're clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and having an objective perspective on what's in front of you. And then, those sorts of discussions become a lot more fruitful, and people then take a lot more of a practical approach.
So if I were to summarise it, you've got these governance, risk and compliance systems, GRC systems. You've picked the software. What you've got to do is have an open mind, because you might do things differently than what you did before. Yep. Have that open mind. But if you know what the outcomes are, you can get to resolution quite quickly on how you want to do things. So you may have to forget how you did things before. Correct. But if you do that right, life can be pretty simple.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, we as a species now, we see that all the time. I get my upgrade on my Apple, on my iPhone, and the first thing I go, because it doesn't do what I want it to do, or it behaves slightly differently to how it behaves last year. Then a week later, I've forgotten about it, and it's better. So then when I get the next upgrade, I'm the same. And there's aspects of that we go through, and it's working that through with organisations.
Change can be scary. Let's not, in all the aspects of our lives, moving house, etc., etc. But I think it's how you plan for it and approach it, and kind of line up the reasons why you're doing it, just sort of takes that fear away. It's particularly scary, and I think this is why we do see a lot in the GRC arena. It can be particularly scary for people who work in audit, risk and compliance, because it's their job to protect the company. So if you start to take away the building blocks and scaffolding that they're used to doing that with, it can be even more so. So that's why, a lot of the things that we talk about and why we want to build this community is to try and take that fear away and start to do this in a modern way.
So if you can use new building blocks with a better foundation,
absolutely,
happy days.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Ken, James, thank you so much for joining me today. And I've got to say, I feel less scared about GRC than I did at the beginning of this podcast. So you must have done something correctly. But just remind us what you'd like listeners to do next.
Yeah, so I think, as we said in the last one, is just respond in the comments below with any thoughts, observations, feedback, and we'll look through that and use that to formulate the subsequent sessions, basically.
Yeah, anything you'd like us to talk about, or even get involved yourself, just let us know.
Yeah.
Fantastic.